People with autism, how would you describe what autism feels like to someone who doesn't have it? Like everyone else is in on an inside joke that you don't know. And when you do know it, everyone thinks you don't, so they leave you out of it still. I thought that's what regular life feels like anyway. Is it possible to be autistic and just never know? Yes, it is entirely possible. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 55. I thought it was just me, hadn't even considered I might be on the spectrum till I met someone with Asperger's, and they said they thought I had it. Did a bunch of research, some reading, went to seminars, and heard Temple Grandin speak a couple of times, had a coworker with a son tell me the same thing, and decided I probably had it. Eventually went to be diagnosed. The doctor talked to me for over 2 hours, and walked out having been diagnosed. The doctor told me I was most definitely on the spectrum, no doubt about it. He also told me I should write a book. Took 5 steps out of the doctor's office and nearly fell. I had to stop for a minute. I got lightheaded, and I suddenly felt like a couple £100 lifted off my shoulders in that moment. As to how it feels, I have always felt like I had a really thick veil around me that filtered a lot of stuff out, so that life people's situations came through somewhat garbled and unintelligible. I just do not get people. Sometimes I have to actively think about what they are actually meaning vs what I understand them to be meaning. I have a couple of friends who I go to for translation when I don't get something, and Google and Reddit are some of my best friends. Most of what everyone else has said, but I'll add this feedback loop. Sometimes things just get stuck in your head. Not just songs or movies, but things you or someone else has said in conversation, which will then be repeated for no apparent reason. I catch myself saying the same things I've already said under my breath, but I'm not trying to understand the what or why of it. I just do it. Effing hate it when things get stuck. Nothing to do about it either except relax and repeat the exact way that rando said hello in my head for 4 hours straight. Wait, do I have autism? Okay, to all of you asking, do I have autism? First of all, no one here can tell you that. We don't know you well enough. Second, I don't have autism, but I do have ADHD. And from how it's been explained to me, I'm pretty sure autism works in a similar way to ADHD when it comes to diagnosing it. Basically, everyone exhibits one or a few symptoms of ADHD. Everyone zones out sometimes or procrastinates sometimes, or struggles with executive functioning sometimes. This does not mean you have ADHD. So then how do you tell if you have ADHD? It's based on the number of symptoms, their frequency, and their severity. If you are experiencing more than a few symptoms of ADHD on a regular basis, and it interferes with your ability to function, then it's time to look into a diagnosis. Think of it this way, if you get occasional headaches, ones that hurt, but aren't super debilitating, that's probably normal. But if it's happening every day, or they are so severe you can't perform your daily activities, or you have a bunch of other concerning symptoms, then there's a good chance there is some underlying issue that you need to get checked out. The key lies in the extent, frequency, and severity of your symptoms. I feel like this needs to be shouted from the mountaintops or something similar to it. A few years ago, when mental illness started becoming a more talked about topic and certain disorders were less vilified, pockets of the internet had an obsession with diagnosing themselves, and in weird cases, other people and even characters purely for exhibiting on or to traits. It got ridiculous with half of Tumblr claiming to have borderline personality disorder. What often isn't expressed in all those resources people are pulling this from is that it's not about a checklist, it's about how those traits impact your life and relationships. If it's genuinely disruptive, that's when it's an illness or disorder. Much like how sneezing a bit doesn't mean you have a major crippling allergy. I'm so glad you wrote this. People wondering, this is a good explanation. Think of a healthy compulsion, like hunger or thirst or horniness. You feel strongly compelled to do thing X because you have an innate or learned knowledge that it will scratch the itch Y. Now imagine that instead of hunger or thirst you have an overall sense of uneasiness, like something is wrong right now, and you don't know what, but for some reason you have an innate instinct that doing thing X will make you feel better, but with no basis and logic whatsoever, like making sure your right foot steps on the same number of sidewalk cracks on the way home as your left foot does. Or arranging the pens in your pen holder so that none of them are leaning against the other. or making sure the stove you know for a fact is off really is off. Even if you already did that. And unfortunately the more you listen to those urges, the worse they get, just like scratching a rash. But at the same time, it feels almost impossible to ignore. To be clear, these are examples I'm using to make it more accessible for the layperson, because they are recognizable from pop culture. Some of my actual compulsions involve deleting and retyping sentences word for word over and over again until I did it right. Always having a certain item in my pocket. Always having a window cracked in any vehicle I'm in, no matter how cold it is out. Arranging lots of objects in the right way, etc etc. As a teenager I felt any surface would make my hands dirty, so I washed my hands hundreds of times a day. It's interesting to read these sorts of things, because I have many compulsions, but have never been diagnosed for anything, and yet I have always felt something is off. I do not intend to make light of any disorder, I'm just someone wondering if I'm crazy, or I do have a disorder like ADHD or Asperger's. It's difficult to diagnose yourself, because we all seem normal to ourselves. I recommend talking to a therapist. Their whole lives are dedicated to helping provide this kind of helpful insight. Therapy has helped me immensely, and it's now a highlight of my week. Also a symptom of ADHD unfortunately. Hate getting stuck repeating the same number over and over in my head for 12 hours straight, or repeating a small section of a song in my head for the whole workday. Only way I've found to block it out is music. Distract my brain with something else to focus on. Yeah, that's like an OCD type thing we get, but not OCD apparently. I know I have mild OCD for sure. Pretty sure I'm not on the spectrum, but I can confirm that the looping is common. As a kid I couldn't even control it, just repeating certain words and phrases like a mantra until they sounded correct to me. Or if a certain thing I said got a positive reaction, I'd dwell on it and repeat the scenario in my head. I catch myself saying the same things I've already said under my breath, but I'm not trying to understand the what or why of it. I just do it. I just read out loud this answer to my partner, who does this all the time. He just admitted to me that he is on the spectrum, which I've suspected for a while now. Thanks for posting this opus. One thing I wish more people knew was how frequently we are excluded from many aspects of society. I never had any friends growing up, so I had a very bizarre childhood of growing up apart from my peers. When you're a bit odd, people don't feel like they have to treat you with even the most basic level of respect. I've always gone out of my way to be very kind to everyone I've worked with, but the majority of people I've worked with have treated me with open hostility. In one circumstance I even had a job offer revoked because they discovered my autism during a pre-employment psych exam. When I appealed to their disability rights coordinator, he told me I wasn't qualified because of my autism and that I was like a man in a wheelchair trying to run in the Olympics. I like very specific objects. I quickly develop really weird attachments that not even I can explain. In school, for example, I would always become attached to specific chairs in the auditorium or in a classroom even. Any break from that order would throw me in a loop of anxiety that I could hardly escape from. I even remember where they were to this day. Second row from stage, third seat from left aisle. No one I spoke to could comprehend why I cared. 26-year-old male, athletic, successful career as a welder. Absolutely no idea how to socialize, and no desire to. Completely alone, no friends my age, especially girls. If I'm with more than 2 other people I completely shut down, can't process all the information I'm taking in. If I'm lucky enough to get a date there is never a second, and I don't understand why. I've never been mean to anyone in my life. I work by myself, and then I come home and work on my fire truck, which I'm completely obsessed with. I go on vacation by myself, never anywhere with crowds, usually some remote fishing spot where I sit by myself all day. I'm the human definition of an island. Also should add huge anxiety issues, scared of planes, boats, elevators, falling asleep, it goes on. I was diagnosed with Asperger's as a kid, which is grouped into the autism spectrum. Many sensory triggers, specifically sounds, are amplified for me. It's a blessing and a curse. I have little trouble hearing people, but shouting can be very overstimulating. It's also very difficult for me to explain myself, and I often have a hard time conveying my thoughts, including this post. I'm probably overlooking a whole plethora of other things I do. And then, there's the social aspect. Growing up I was often singled out for not knowing what I'm supposed to do socially, as if it's an unwritten rule I was never told. I can't pick up on subtle hints about how someone's feeling, body language, etc. to save my life. So someone has to be extremely direct in order to tell me what they're going through. It's lost me a lot of friends as a kid. Thankfully, I've met some good people in my college life so far and all of them have been very understanding with me. Everyone in the world knows what to do and how to act but you, and you're never told because it's an unwritten rule. I have an autistic friend who described it as everyone else got instructions on how to be a person and I just didn't. This is the best simple description of what it feels like. I find this question very difficult to answer. People often tell me I seem so normal, but it is very hard to describe how much effort I've put in to fit in. I'm going to use this from now on. I think it is the best way to describe it in a simple sentence. Imagine if human sensory had settings, and all of them were at maximum. No matter how hard you try, no matter what you say, you can't make people who don't feel the same truly understand how bad it is. Everyone thinks you're exaggerating or making excuses for yourself. Sometimes it feels like the world is screaming at me. The feeling is so overwhelming that, no matter what I'm doing, no matter how much I may normally enjoy it, the only way to make it stop is to drop everything and run back to the safety of my bedroom. Often I don't even realize that I'm not interpreting a situation differently than most other people. Just because I express things differently and maybe my affect seems flat doesn't mean I don't have emotions or can't feel sympathy. Of course, my flat affect can also signify my deep depression which, like anxiety, afflicts people with autism spectrum disorders at about 4 times the rate found in non-autistic people. But it definitely doesn't equal a lack of empathy. I can only speak for myself. Everyone is different. It feels like you're in a play and everyone has the script apart from you. Not my quote, but I saw it somewhere, and I resonated with it so much. I'm both autistic and a theater kid and I relate to both the literal and metaphorical sense of this. For me, it feels like I'm being forced to participate. I'm a society that actively works against me. Almost like being in a terrible play, where everyone has a script but me, and I get blamed for it. The hugging. My god. Well, I'm a hugger. Well, I guess I'll be unbelievably uncomfortable while you force hug me as my skin crawls. It's incredibly offensive. No one is entitled to my body in any other situation. Why are you entitled to my hugs? And they always have this idea that you'll eventually grow to like it cause irony geez. No, I will just grow to dread seeing you. Do you have any comments on this topic? Leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Toodles.